But yeah, let's start this. 1,000 cans of beer on the wall, 1,000 cans of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 999 bottles of beer on the wall, 999 bottles of beer on the wall, 999 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 998 bottles of beer on the wall, 998 bottles of beer on the wall, 998 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 997 bottles of beer on the wall, 997 bottles of beer on the wall, 997 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. I didn't start that timer! Thank you for actually letting me know that. We're gonna start over, it's fine. 3, 2, 1, go. 1,000 bottles of beer on the wall, 1,000 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 999 bottles of beer on the wall, 999 bottles of beer on the wall, 999 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 998 bottles of beer on the wall, 998 bottles of beer on the wall, 998 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 997 bottles of beer on the wall, 997 bottles of beer on the wall, 997 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 996 bottles of beer on the wall, 996 bottles of beer on the wall, 996 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 995 bottles of beer on the wall, 995 bottles of beer on the wall, 995 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 994 bottles of beer on the wall, 994 bottles of beer on the wall, 994 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 993 bottles of beer on the wall, 993 bottles of beer on the wall, 993 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 992 bottles of beer on the wall, 992 bottles of beer on the wall, 992 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 991 bottles of beer on the wall, 991 bottles of beer on the wall, 991 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 990 bottles of beer on the wall, 990 bottles of beer on the wall, 990 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 989 bottles of beer on the wall, 989 bottles of beer on the wall, 989 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 987 bottles of beer on the wall. No, 998 bottles of beer on the wall, 998 bottles of beer on the wall, 998 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. And there's 987 bottles of beer on the wall, 987 bottles of beer on the wall, 987 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 986 bottles of beer on the wall, 986 bottles of beer on the wall, 986 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 985 bottles of beer on the wall, 985 bottles of beer on the wall, 985 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 984 bottles of beer on the wall, 984 bottles of beer on the wall, 985 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 983 bottles of beer on the wall, 983 bottles of beer on the wall, 983 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 982 bottles of beer on the wall, 982 bottles of beer on the wall, 982 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 981 bottles of beer on the wall, 981 bottles of beer on the wall, 981 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 980 bottles of beer on the wall, 980 bottles of beer on the wall, 980 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 979 bottles of beer on the wall, 979 bottles of beer on the wall, 979 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 978 bottles of beer on the wall, 978 bottles of beer on the wall, 978 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 977 bottles of beer on the wall, 977 bottles of beer on the wall, 970 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 976 bottles of beer on the wall, 976 bottles of beer on the wall, 976 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 975 bottles of beer on the wall, 975 bottles of beer on the wall, 975 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 974 bottles of beer on the wall, 974 bottles of beer on the wall, 974 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 973 bottles of beer on the wall, 973 bottles of beer on the wall, 973 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 972 bottles of beer on the wall, 972 bottles of beer on the wall, 972 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 971 bottles of beer on the wall, 971 bottles of beer on the wall, 971 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 970 bottles of beer on the wall, 970 bottles of beer on the wall, 970 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 969 bottles of beer on the wall, 969 bottles of beer on the wall, 969 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 968 bottles of beer on the wall, 968 bottles of beer on the wall, 968 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 967 bottles of beer on the wall, 967 bottles of beer on the wall, 967 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 966 bottles of beer on the wall, 966 bottles of beer on the wall, 966 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 965 bottles of beer on the wall, 965 bottles of beer on the wall, 965 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 964 bottles of beer on the wall, 964 bottles of beer on the wall, 964 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 963 bottles of beer on the wall, 963 bottles of beer on the wall, 963 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 962 bottles of beer on the wall, 962 bottles of beer on the wall, 962 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 961 bottles of beer on the wall, 961 bottles of beer on the wall, 961 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 960 bottles of beer on the wall, 960 bottles of beer on the wall, 960 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 959 bottles of beer on the wall, 959 bottles of beer on the wall, 959 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 958 bottles of beer on the wall, wall, 958 bottles of beer on the wall, 958 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 957 bottles of beer on the wall, 957 bottles of beer on the wall, 957 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 956 bottles of beer on the wall, 956 bottles of beer on the wall, 956 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 955 bottles of beer on the wall, 955 bottles of beer on the wall, 955 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 954 bottles of beer on the wall, 954 bottles of beer on the wall, 954 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 953 bottles of beer on the wall, 953 bottles of beer on the wall, 953 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 952 bottles of beer on the wall, 952 bottles of beer on the wall, 952 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 951 bottles of beer on the wall, 951 bottles of beer on the wall, 951 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. 950 bottles of beer on the wall, 949 bottles of beer on the wall, 949 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. That is 949 bottles of beer on the wall, 949 bottles of beer on the wall, 949 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 948 bottles of beer on the wall, 948 bottles of beer on the wall, 948 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 947 bottles of beer on the wall, 947 bottles of beer on the wall, 947 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 946 bottles of beer on the wall, 946 bottles of beer on the wall, 946 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 945 bottles of beer on the wall, 945 bottles of beer on the wall, 945 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 944 bottles of beer on the wall, 944 bottles of beer on the wall, 944 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 943 bottles of beer on the wall, 943 bottles of beer on the wall, 943 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 942 bottles of beer on the wall, 942 bottles of beer on the wall, 942 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 941 bottles of beer on the wall, 941 bottles of beer on the wall, 941 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 940 bottles of beer on the wall, 940 bottles of beer on the wall, 940 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 939 bottles of beer on the wall, 939 bottles of beer on the wall, 939 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 938 bottles of beer on the wall, 938 bottles of beer on the wall, 938 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 937 bottles of beer on the wall, 937 bottles of beer on the wall, 937 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 936 bottles of beer on the wall, 936 bottles of beer on the wall, 936 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 935 bottles of beer on the wall, 935 bottles of beer on the wall, 935 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 934 bottles of beer on the wall, 934 bottles of beer on the wall, 934 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 933 bottles of beer on the wall, 933 bottles of beer on the wall, 933 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 932 bottles of beer on the wall, 932 bottles of beer on the wall, 932 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 931 bottles of beer on the wall, 931 bottles of beer on the wall, 931 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 930 bottles of beer on the wall, 930 bottles of beer on the wall, 930 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 929 bottles of beer on the wall, 929 bottles of beer on the wall, 929 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 928 bottles of beer on the wall, 928 bottles of beer on the wall, 928 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 927 bottles of beer on the wall, 927 bottles of beer on the wall, 927 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 926 bottles of beer on the wall, 926 bottles of beer on the wall, 926 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 925 bottles of beer on the wall, 925 bottles of beer on the wall, 925 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 924 bottles of beer on the wall, 924 bottles of beer on the wall, 924 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 923 bottles of beer on the wall, 923 bottles of beer on the wall, 923 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 922 bottles of beer on the wall, 922 bottles of beer on the wall, 922 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 921 bottles of beer on the wall, 921 bottles of beer on the wall, 921 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 920 bottles of beer on the wall, 920 bottles of beer on the wall, 920 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 919 bottles of beer on the wall, 919 bottles of beer on the wall, 919 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 918 bottles of beer on the wall, 918 bottles of beer on the wall, 918 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 917 bottles of beer on the wall, 917 bottles of beer on the wall, 917 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 916 bottles of beer on the wall, 916 bottles of beer on the wall, 916 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now 915 bottles of beer on the wall, 915 bottles of beer on the wall, 915 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now 914 bottles of beer on the wall, 914 bottles of beer on the wall, 914 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Now there's 913 bottles of beer on the wall, 913 bottles of beer on the wall, 913 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 912 bottles of beer on the wall, 912 bottles of beer on the wall, 912 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 911 bottles of beer on the wall, 911 bottles of beer on the wall, 911 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 910 bottles of beer on the wall, 910 bottles of beer on the wall, 910 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 909 bottles of beer on the wall, 909 bottles of beer on the wall, 909 809 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 908 bottles of beer on the wall. 908 bottles of beer on the wall. 908 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 907 bottles of beer on the wall. 907 bottles of beer on the wall. 907 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 906 bottles of beer on the wall. 906 bottles of beer on the wall. 906 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 905 bottles of beer on the wall. 905 bottles of beer on the wall. 905 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 904 bottles of beer on the wall. 904 bottles of beer on the wall. 904 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 903 bottles of beer on the wall. 903 bottles of beer on the wall. 903 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 902 bottles of beer on the wall. 902 bottles of beer on the wall. 902 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 901 bottles of beer on the wall. 901 bottles of beer on the wall. 901 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 900 bottles of beer on the wall. All right, we made it to 900. We made it to 900. We made it to 900. Okay. Not. I was taking a drink of water. Not. 900 bottles of beer on the wall. 900 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 899 bottles of beer on the wall. 899 bottles of beer on the wall. 899 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 898 bottles of beer on the wall. 898 bottles of beer on the wall. 898 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 897 bottles of beer on the wall. 897 bottles of beer on the wall. 897 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 896 bottles of beer on the wall. 896 bottles of beer on the wall. 896 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 895 bottles of beer on the wall. 895 bottles of beer on the wall. 895 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 894 bottles of beer on the wall. 894 bottles of beer on the wall. 894 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 893 bottles of beer on the wall. 893 bottles of beer on the wall. 893 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 892 bottles of beer on the wall. 892 bottles of beer on the wall. 892 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 891 bottles of beer on the wall. 891 bottles of beer on the wall. 891 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 890 bottles of beer on the wall. 890 bottles of beer on the wall. 890 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 889 bottles of beer on the wall. 889 bottles of beer on the wall. 889 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 888 bottles of beer on the wall. 888 bottles of beer on the wall. 888 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 887 bottles of beer on the wall. Bottles of beer on the wall. 887 bottles of beer on the wall. 887 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 886 bottles of beer on the wall. 886 bottles of beer on the wall. 886 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 885 bottles of beer on the wall. 885 bottle of beer on the wall. 885 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 884 bottles of beer on the wall. 884 bottles of beer on the wall. 884 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around.
Yo, Zen, what are you doing, step bro?
885 bottles of beer on the wall. 885 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 884 bottles of beer on the wall. 884 bottles of beer on the wall. 884 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 883 bottles of beer on the wall. 883 bottles of beer on the wall. 883 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now it's 882 bottles of beer on the wall. 882 bottles of beer on the wall. 882 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 881 bottles of beer on the wall. 881 bottles of beer on the wall. 881 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 880 bottles of beer on the wall. 880 bottles of beer on the wall. 880 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 879 bottles of beer on the wall. 879 bottles of beer on the wall. 879 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 878 bottles of beer on the wall. 878 bottles of beer on the wall. 878 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 877 bottles of beer on the wall. 878 bottles. 870 bottles of beer on the wall. 878 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 877 bottles of beer on the wall. 877 bottles of beer on the wall. 877 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 876 bottles of beer on the wall. 876 bottles of beer on the wall. 876 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 875 bottles of beer on the wall. 875 bottles of beer on the wall. 875 bottles of beer. Oh my fucking god. 875 bottles of beer on the wall. 875 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 874 bottles of beer on the wall. 874 bottles of beer on the wall. 874 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 873 bottles of beer on the wall. 873 bottles of beer on the wall. 873 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 872 bottles of beer on the wall. 872 bottles of beer on the wall. 872 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 871 bottles of beer on the wall. 871 bottles of beer on the wall. 871 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 870 bottles of beer on the wall. 870 bottles of beer on the wall. 870 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 869 bottles of beer on the wall. 869 bottles of beer on the wall. 869 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 868 bottles of beer on the wall. 868 bottles of beer on the wall. 868 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 867 bottles of beer on the wall. 867 bottles of beer on the wall. 867 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 866 bottles of beer on the wall. 866 bottles of beer on the wall. 866 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 865 bottles of beer on the wall. 865 bottles of beer on the wall. 865 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around until. Fucking God, 864 bottles of beer on the wall. 864 bottles of beer on the wall. 864 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 863 bottles of beer on the wall. 863 bottles of beer on the wall. 863 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 862 bottles of beer on the wall. 862 bottles of beer on the wall. 862 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 861 bottles of beer on the wall. 861 bottles of beer on the wall. 861 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 860 bottles of beer on the wall. 860 bottles of beer on the wall. 860 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 859 bottles of beer on the wall. 859 bottles of beer on the wall. 859 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 858 bottles of beer on the wall. 858 bottles of beer on the wall. 858 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 857 bottles of beer on the wall. 857 bottles of beer on the wall. 857 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 856 bottles of beer on the wall. 856 bottles of beer on the wall. 856 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 855 bottles of beer on the wall. 855 bottles of beer on the wall. 855 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 854 bottles of beer on the wall. 854 bottles of beer on the wall. 854 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 852 bottles of beer on the wall. 852 bottles of beer on the wall. 853 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 852 bottles of beer on the wall. 852 bottles of beer on the wall. 852 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 851 bottles of beer on the wall. 851 bottles of beer on the wall. 851 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 850 bottles of beer on the wall. 850 bottles of beer on the wall. 850 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 849 bottles of beer on the wall. 849 bottles of beer on the wall. 849 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 848 bottles of beer on the wall. 848 bottles of beer on the wall. 848 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 847 bottles of beer on the wall. 847 bottles of beer on the wall. 847 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 846 bottles of beer on the wall. 846 bottles of beer on the wall. 846 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 845 bottles of beer on the wall. 845 bottles of beer on the wall. 845 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 844 bottles of beer on the wall. 844 bottles of beer on the wall. 844 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 843 bottles of beer on the wall. 843 bottles of beer on the wall. 843 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 842 bottles of beer on the wall. 842 bottles of beer on the wall. 842 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 841 bottles of beer on the wall. 841 bottles of beer on the wall. 841 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 840 bottles of beer on the wall. 840 bottles of beer on the wall. 840 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 839 bottles of beer on the wall. 839 bottles of beer on the wall. 839 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 838 bottles of beer on the wall. 838 bottles of beer on the wall. 838 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 837 bottles of beer on the wall. 837 bottles of beer on the wall. 837 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 836 bottles of beer on the wall. 836 bottles of beer on the wall. 836 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 835 bottles of beer on the wall. 835 bottles of beer on the wall. 835 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now that's 834 bottles of beer on the wall. 834 bottles of beer on the wall. 834 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 833 bottles of beer on the wall. 833 bottles of beer on the wall. 832 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 832 bottles of beer on the wall. 832 bottles of beer on the wall. 832 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 831 bottles of beer on the wall. 831 bottles of beer on the wall. 831 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 830 bottles of beer on the wall. 830 bottles of beer on the wall. 830 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 829 bottles of beer on the wall. 829 bottles of beer on the wall. 829 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 828 bottles of beer on the wall. 828 bottles of beer on the wall. 828 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 827 bottles of beer on the wall. 827 bottles of beer on the wall. 827 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 826 bottles of beer on the wall, 826 bottles of beer on the wall, 826 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 825 bottles of beer on the wall, 825 bottles of beer on the wall, 825 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 824 bottles of beer on the wall, 824 bottles of beer on the wall, 824 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 823 bottles of beer on the wall, 823 bottles of beer on the wall, 823 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 822 bottles of beer on the wall, 822 bottles of beer on the wall, 822 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 821 bottles of beer on the wall, 821 bottles of beer on the wall, 821 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 820 bottles of beer on the wall, 820 bottles of beer on the wall, 820 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 819 bottles of beer on the wall, 819 bottles of beer on the wall, 819 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 818 bottles of beer on the wall, 818 bottles of beer on the wall, 818 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 817 bottles of beer on the wall, 817 bottles of beer on the wall, 817 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. There's 816 bottles of beer on the wall, 816 bottles of beer on the wall, 816 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. There's 815 bottles of beer on the wall, 850 bottles of beer on the wall, 815 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. There's 814 bottles of beer on the wall, 814 bottles of beer on the wall, 814 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. There's 813 bottles of beer on the wall, 813 bottles of beer on the wall, 813 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. There's 812 bottles of beer on the wall, 812 bottles of beer on the wall, 812 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. 811 bottles of beer on the wall, 811 bottles of beer on the wall, 811 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 810 bottles of beer on the wall, 810 bottles of beer on the wall, 810 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 809 bottles of beer on the wall, 809 bottles of beer on the wall, 809 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 808 bottles of beer on the wall, 808 bottles of beer on the wall, 808 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 807 bottles of beer on the wall, 807 bottles of beer on the wall, 870 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 806 bottles of beer on the wall, 806 bottles of beer on the wall, 806 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 805 bottles of beer on the wall, 805 bottles of beer on the wall, 805 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 804 bottles of beer on the wall, 804 bottles of beer on the wall, 804 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 803 bottles of beer on the wall, 803 bottles of beer on the wall, 803 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 802 bottles of beer on the wall, 802 bottles of beer on the wall, 802 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. There's 800 bottles of beer on the wall, 801 bottles of beer on the wall, 801 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 800 bottles of beer on the wall. All right, we made it to 800. I need to take off my shirt. Oh my gosh.
Yo, Zeb.
Oh,
Fuck.
oh my god, I'm fucking sweaty. Oh god. Okay. 800 bottles of beer on the wall, 800 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 799 bottles of beer on the wall, 799 bottles of beer on the wall, 799 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 798 bottles of beer on the wall, 798 bottles of beer on the wall, 798 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 798 bottles of beer on the wall, 798 bottles of beer on the wall, 798 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 797 bottles of beer on the wall, 797 bottles of beer on the wall, 797 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 796 bottles of beer on the wall, 796 bottles of beer on the wall, 796 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 795 bottles of beer on the wall, 795 bottles of beer on the wall, 795 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 798 bottles of beer on the wall, 798 bottles of beer on the wall, 798 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 797 bottles of beer on the wall, 797 bottles of beer on the wall, 797 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 796 bottles of beer on the wall, 796 bottles of beer on the wall, 796 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now there's 795 bottles of beer on the wall, 795 bottles of beer on the wall, 795 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 794 bottles of beer on the wall, 794 bottles of beer on the wall, 794 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 793 bottles of beer on the wall, 793 bottles of beer on the wall, 793 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now 792 bottles of beer on the wall, 792 bottles of beer on the wall, 792 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now 791 bottles of beer on the wall, 791 bottles of beer on the wall, 791 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 790 bottles of beer on the wall, 790 bottles of beer on the wall, 790 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 789 bottles of beer on the wall, 789 bottles of beer on the wall, 789 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 788 bottles of beer on the wall, 788 bottles of beer on the wall, 788 bottles of beer, take one down, pass it around. Now to 787 bottles of beer on the wall, 787 bottles of beer on the wall, 787 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 786 bottles of beer on the wall. 786 bottles of beer on the wall. 786 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 785 bottles of beer on the wall. 785 bottles of beer on the wall. 785 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 784 bottles of beer on the wall. 784 bottles of beer on the wall. 784 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 783 bottles of beer on the wall. 783 bottles of beer on the wall. 783 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 782 bottles of beer on the wall. 782 bottles of beer on the wall. 782 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 781 bottles of beer on the wall. 781 bottles of beer on the wall. 781 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 780 bottles of beer on the wall. 780 bottles of beer on the wall. 780 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 779 bottles of beer on the wall. 779 bottles of beer on the wall. 779 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 778 bottles of beer on the wall. 778 bottles of beer on the wall. 778 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 777 bottles of beer on the wall. 777 bottles of beer on the wall. 777 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 776 bottles of beer on the wall. 776 bottles of beer on the wall. 776 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 775 bottles of beer on the wall. 775 bottles of beer on the wall. 775 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 774 bottles of beer on the wall. 774 bottles of beer on the wall. 774 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 773 bottles of beer on the wall. 773 bottles of beer on the wall. 773 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 772 bottles of beer on the wall. 772 bottles of beer on the wall. 772 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 771 bottles of beer on the wall. 771 bottles of beer on the wall. 771 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 770 bottles of beer on the wall. 770 bottles of beer on the wall. 770 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 769 bottles of beer on the wall. 769 bottles of beer on the wall. 769 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 768 bottles of beer on the wall. 768 bottles of beer on the wall. 768 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 767 bottles of beer on the wall. 767 bottles of beer on the wall. 767 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 766 bottles of beer on the wall. 766 bottles of beer on the wall. 766 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 765 bottles of beer on the wall. 765 bottles of beer on the wall. 765 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 764 bottles of beer on the wall. 764 bottles of beer on the wall. 764 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 763 bottles of beer on the wall. 763 bottles of beer on the wall. 763 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 762 bottles of beer on the wall. 762 bottles of beer on the wall. 762 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 761 bottles of beer on the wall. 761 bottles of beer on the wall. 761 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 760 bottles of beer on the wall. 760 bottles of beer on the wall. 760 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 759 bottles of beer on the wall. 759 bottles of beer on the wall. 759 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 758 bottles of beer on the wall. 758 bottles of beer on the wall. 758 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 757 bottles of beer on the wall. 757 bottles of beer on the wall. 757 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 756 bottles of beer on the wall. 756 bottles of beer on the wall. 756 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 755 bottles of beer on the wall. 755 bottles of beer on the wall. 755 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 754 bottles of beer on the wall. 754 bottles of beer on the wall. 754 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 752 bottles of beer on the wall. 753 bottles of beer on the wall. 753 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 752 bottles of beer on the wall. 752 bottles of beer on the wall. 752 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 751 bottles of beer on the wall. 751 bottles of beer on the wall. 751 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 750 bottles of beer on the wall. 750 bottles of beer on the wall. 750 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 749 bottles of beer on the wall. 749 bottles of beer on the wall. 749 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 748 bottles of beer on the wall. 748 bottles of beer on the wall. 748 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 747 bottles of beer on the wall. 747 bottles of beer on the wall. 747 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 746 bottles of beer on the wall. 746 bottles of beer on the wall. 746 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 745 bottles of beer on the wall. 745 bottles of beer on the wall. 745 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 744 bottles of beer on the wall. 744 bottles of beer on the wall. 744 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 743 bottles of beer on the wall. 743 bottles of beer on the wall. 743 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 742 bottles of beer on the wall. 742 bottles of beer on the wall. 742 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 741 bottles of beer on the wall. 741 bottles of beer on the wall. 741 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 740 bottles of beer on the wall. 740 bottles of beer on the wall. 740 bottles of beer. 739, 740 bottles of beer on 74 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 739 bottles of beer on the wall. 739 bottles of beer on the wall. 739 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 738 bottles of beer on the wall. 738 bottles of beer on the wall. 738 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 737 bottles of beer on the wall, 737 bottles of beer on the wall, 737 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 736 bottles of beer on the wall, 736 bottles of beer on the wall, 736 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 735 bottles of beer on the wall, 735 bottles of beer on the wall, 734 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 734 bottles of beer on the wall, 734 bottles of beer on the wall, 734 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 733 bottles of beer on the wall. 733 bottles of beer on the wall, 733 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 732 bottles of beer on the wall, 732 bottles of beer on the wall, 732 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 731 bottles of beer on the wall, 731 bottles of beer on the wall, 731 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 730 bottles of beer on the wall, 730 bottles of beer on the wall, 730 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 729 bottles of beer on the wall, 729 bottles of beer on the wall, 729 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 728 bottles of beer on the wall, 728 bottles of beer on the wall, 728 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 727 bottles of beer on the wall, 727 bottles of beer on the wall, 727 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 726 bottles of beer on the wall, 726 bottles of beer on the wall, 726 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 725 bottles of beer on the wall, 725 bottles of beer on the wall, 725 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 724 bottles of beer on the wall, 724 bottles of beer on the wall, 724 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 723 bottles of beer on the wall, 723 bottles of beer on the wall, 723 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 722 bottles of beer on the wall, 722 bottles of beer on the wall, 722 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 721 bottles of beer on the wall, 721 bottles of beer on the wall, 721 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 720 bottles of beer on the wall, 720 bottles of beer on the wall, 720 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 719 bottles of beer on the wall, 719 bottles of beer on the wall, 719 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 718 bottles of beer on the wall, 718 bottles of beer on the wall, 718 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 717 bottles of beer on the wall, 717 bottles of beer on the wall, 717 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 716 bottles of beer on the wall, 760 bottles of beer on the wall, 760 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 715 bottles of beer on the wall, 715 bottles of beer on the wall, 750 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 714 bottles of beer on the wall, 714 bottles of beer on the wall, 714 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 713 bottles of beer on the wall, 713 bottles of beer on the wall, 713 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 712 bottles of beer on the wall, 712 bottles of beer on the wall, 712 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 711 bottles of beer on the wall, 711 bottles of beer on the wall, 711 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 710 bottles of beer on the wall, 710 bottles of beer on the wall, 710 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 709 bottles of beer on the wall, 709 bottles of beer on the wall, 709 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 708 bottles of beer on the wall, 708 bottles of beer on the wall, 708 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 707 bottles of beer on the wall, 707 bottles of beer on the wall, 707 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 706 bottles of beer on the wall, 706 bottles of beer on the wall, 706 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 705 bottles of beer on the wall, 705 bottles of beer on the wall, 705 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass them around. Now there's 74 bottles of beer on the wall, 74 bottles of beer on the wall, 74 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 703 bottles of beer on the wall, 73 bottles of beer on the wall, 703 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 72 bottles of beer on the wall, 72 bottles of beer on the wall, 72 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 701 bottles of beer on the wall, 701 bottles of beer on the wall, 701 bottles of beer, 700 bottles. Now there's 701 bottles of beer on the wall, 701 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 700 bottles of beer on the wall. Fucking God, my throat hurts.
Them guys, bro. I tried shit.
700 bottles of beer on the wall, 700 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 699 bottles of beer on the wall, 699 bottles of beer on the wall, 699 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 698 bottles of beer on the wall, 698 bottles of beer on the wall, 698 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 697 bottles of beer on the wall, 697 bottles of beer on the wall, 697 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 696 bottles of beer on the wall, 696 bottles of beer on the wall, 696 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 65 bottles of beer on the wall, 696 bottles of beer on the wall, 696 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 965 bottles of beer on the wall, 965 bottles of beer on the wall, 965 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 964 bottles of beer on the wall, 994 bottles of beer on the wall, 994 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 994 bottles of beer on the wall. 994 bottles of beer on the wall. 994 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 993 bottles of beer on the wall. 993 bottles of beer on the wall. 993 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 992 bottles of beer on the wall. 992 bottles of beer on the wall. 992 bottles of. Wait, what? 692. Wait. 692. 692. I think I said 900. We're at 692. 692 bottles of beer on the wall. 692 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's. No. We did 300 of them already. We're at 692. Don't try and fuck me up. We're at 692. I just did fucking 300. Don't try and fuck me up, because Pumpkin literally just came in here and said we're down to 700 already. Jesus Christ. 692 bottles of beer on the wall. 692 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 691 bottles of beer on the wall. 691 bottles of beer on the wall. 691 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 690 bottles of beer on the wall. 690 bottles of beer on the wall. 690 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 689 bottles of beer on the wall. 689 bottles of beer on the wall. 689 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 688 bottles of beer on the wall. 688 bottles of beer on the wall. 688 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 687 bottles of beer on the wall. 687 bottles of beer on the wall. 687 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 686 bottles of beer on the wall. 686 bottles of beer on the wall. 686 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 685 bottles of beer on the wall. 685 bottles of beer on the wall. 685 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 684 bottles of beer on the wall. 684 bottles of beer on the wall. 684 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 683 bottles of beer on the wall. 683 bottles of beer on the wall. 683 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 682 bottles of beer on the wall. 682 bottles of beer on the wall. 682 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 681 bottles of beer on the wall. 681 bottles of beer on the wall. 681 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 680 bottles of beer on the wall. The only way I'm restarting is if somebody donates 100 subs. If somebody donates 100 subs, I'll fucking restart. If I mess the fuck up and I catch the number that I was on, y'all can respectfully eat it. 680 bottles of beer on the wall. 680 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 679 bottles of beer on the wall. 679 bottles of beer on the wall. 679 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 678 bottles of beer on the wall. 678 bottles of beer on the wall. 678 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 677 bottles of beer on the wall. 677 bottles of beer on the wall. 677 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 676 bottles of beer on the wall. 676 bottles of beer on the wall. 676 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 675 bottles of beer on the wall. 675 bottles of beer on the wall. 675 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 674 bottles of beer on the wall. 674 bottles of beer on the wall. 674 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 673 bottles of beer on the wall. 673 bottles of beer on the wall. 663 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 672 bottles of beer on the wall. 672 bottles of beer on the wall. 672 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 671 bottles of beer on the wall. 671 bottles of beer on the wall. 671 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 670 bottles of beer on the wall. 670 bottles of beer on the wall. 670 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 669 bottles of beer on the wall. 669 bottles of beer on the wall. 669 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 669 bottles of beer on the wall. 669 bottles of beer on the wall. 669 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 668 bottles of beer on the wall. 668 bottles of beer on the wall. 668 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 667 bottles of beer on the wall. 667 bottles of beer on the wall. 667 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 666 bottles of beer on the wall. 666 bottles of beer on the wall. 666 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 665 bottles of beer on the wall. 665 bottles of beer on the wall. 665 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 664 bottles of beer on the wall. 664 bottles of beer on the wall. 664 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 663 bottles of beer on the wall. 663 bottles of beer on the wall. 663 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 662 bottles of beer on the wall. 662 bottles of beer on the wall. 662 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 661 bottles of beer on the wall. 661 bottles of beer on the wall. 661 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 660 bottles of beer on the wall. 660 bottles of beer on the wall. 660 bottles of beer. Take one down, Pass it around another 659 bottles of beer on the wall, 659 bottles of beer on the wall, 659 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 658 bottles of beer on the wall, 658 bottles of beer on the wall, 658 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 657 bottles of beer on the wall, 657 bottles of beer on the wall, 657 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 656 bottles of beer on the wall, 656 bottles of beer on the wall, 656 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 655 bottles of beer on the wall. 655 bottles of beer on the wall, 655 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around that 654 bottles of beer on the wall, 654 bottles of beer on the wall, 654 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around that 652 bottles of beer on the wall, 652 bottles of beer on the wall, 652 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around that 652 bottles of beer on the wall, 652 bottles of beer on the wall, 652 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around that 651 bottles of beer on the wall, 651 bottles of beer on the wall, 651 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 650 bottles of beer on the wall, 650 bottles of beer on the wall, 650 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around that 649 bottles of beer on the wall, 649 bottles of beer on the wall. 649 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 648 bottles of beer on the wall, 648 bottles of beer on the wall, 648 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 647 bottles of beer on the wall, 647 bottles of beer on the wall, 647 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 646 bottles of beer on the wall, 646 bottles of beer on the wall, 646 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 645 bottles of beer on the wall, 645 bottles of beer on the wall, 645 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 644 bottles of beer on the wall, 644 bottles of beer on the wall, 644 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 643 bottles of beer on the wall, 643 bottles of beer on the wall, 643 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 642 bottles of beer on the wall, 642 bottles of beer on the wall, 642 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 641 bottles of beer on the wall, 641 bottles of beer on the wall, 641 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 640 bottles of beer on the wall, 640 bottles of beer on the wall, 640 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 639 bottles of beer on the wall, 639 bottles of beer on the wall, 639 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 638 bottles of beer on the wall, 638 bottles of beer on the wall, 638 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 637 bottles of beer on the wall, 637 bottles of beer on the wall, 637 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 636 bottles of beer on the wall, 636 bottles of beer on the wall, 636 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 634 bottles of beer on the wall, 630. 635 bottles of beer, 736 bottles of beer, 736 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 635 bottles of beer on the wall, 635 bottles of beer on the wall, 635 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 634 bottles of beer on the wall, 634 bottles of beer on the wall, 634 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 633 bottles of beer on the wall, 633 bottles of beer on the wall, 633 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 632 bottles of beer on the wall, 632 bottles of beer on the wall, 632 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around 631 bottles of beer on the wall, 631 bottles of beer on the wall, 631 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around another 629 bottles of beer on the wall, 629 bottles of beer on the wall, 629 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 620 bottles of beer on the wall, 620 bottles of beer on the wall, 620 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 627 bottles of beer on the wall, 627 bottles of beer on the wall, 627 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 626 bottles of beer on the wall, 626 bottles of beer on the wall, 626 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 625 bottles of beer on the wall, 625 bottles of beer on the wall, 625 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 624 bottles of beer on the wall, 624 bottles of beer on the wall, 624 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 623 bottles of beer on the wall, 623 bottles of beer on the wall, 623 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 622 bottles of beer on the wall, 622 bottles of beer on the wall, 622 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 621 bottles of beer on the wall, 621 bottles of beer on the wall, 621 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 620 bottles of beer on the wall, 620 bottles of beer on the wall, 620 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 619 bottles of beer on the wall, 619 bottles of beer on the wall, 619 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 618 bottles of beer on the wall, 618 bottles of beer on the wall, 618 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 617 bottles of beer on the wall, 617 bottles of beer on the wall, 617 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 616 bottles of beer on the wall, 616 bottles of beer on the wall, 616 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 615 bottles of beer on the wall, 615 bottles of beer on the wall, 615 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 614 bottles of beer on the wall, 614 bottles of beer on the wall, 614 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 613 bottles of beer on the wall, 613 bottles of beer on the wall, 613 bottles of beer. Take one down, untime him out, untime him out. Untime him out. 613 bottles of beer on 613 bottles of beer on the wall, 613 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 612 bottles of beer on the wall, 612 bottles of beer on the wall, 612 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 611 bottles of beer on the wall, 611 bottles of beer on the wall, 611 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 610 bottles of beer on the wall, 610 bottles of beer on the wall, 610 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around They can do that. It's they can fuck me up if they want. Like let them do that. They've been doing that from the beginning. 610 bottles of beer on the wall. 610 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 609 bottles of beer on the wall. 609 bottles of beer on the wall. 609 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 608 bottles of beer on the wall. 608 bottles of beer on the wall. 608 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 607 bottles of beer on the wall. 607 bottles of beer on the wall. 607 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 606 bottles of beer on the wall. 606 bottles of beer on the wall. 606 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 645 bottles of beer on the wall. 605 bottles of beer on the wall. 605 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 604 bottles of beer on the wall. 604 bottles of beer on the wall. 604 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 603 bottles of beer on the wall. 603 bottles of beer on the wall. 603 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 602 bottles of beer on the wall. 602 bottles of beer on the wall. 602 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 601 bottles of beer on the wall. 601 bottles of beer on the wall. 601 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 600 bottles of beer on the wall. 600 bottles of beer on the wall. 600 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 599 bottles of beer on the wall. 599 bottles of beer on the wall. 599 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 590 bottles of beer on the wall. 590 bottles of beer on the wall. 590 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 597 bottles of beer on the wall. 597 bottles of beer on the wall. 597 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 596 bottles of beer on the wall. 596 bottles of beer on the wall. 596 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 595 bottles of beer on the wall. 595 bottles of beer on the wall. 595 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 594 bottles of beer on the wall. 594 bottles of beer on the wall. 594 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around another 593 bottles of beer on the wall. 593 bottles of beer on the wall. 593 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around another 592 bottles of beer on the wall. 592 bottles of beer on the wall. 592 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around another 591 bottles of beer on the wall. Beer on the wall. 590 bottles of beer on the wall. 590 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around 589 bottles of beer on the wall. 589 bottles of beer on the wall. 589 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 588 bottles of beer on the wall. 588 bottles of beer on the wall. 580 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around 587 bottles of beer on the wall. 587 bottles of beer on the wall. 587 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around another 586 bottles of beer on the wall. 586 bottles of beer on the wall. 586 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 585 bottles of beer on the wall. 585 bottles of beer on the wall. 585 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 584 bottles of beer on the wall. 584 bottles of beer on the wall. 584 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 583 bottles of beer on the wall. 583 bottles of beer on the wall. 583 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 582 bottles of beer on the wall. 582 bottles of beer on the wall. 582 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 581 bottles of beer on the wall. 581 bottles of beer on the wall. 581 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there is 580 bottles of beer on the wall. 580 bottles of beer on the wall. 580 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass around 579 bottles of beer on the wall. 579 bottles of beer on the wall. 579 bottles of beer. 79 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there is 570 bottles of beer on the wall. 570 bottles of beer on the wall. 570 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 577 bottles of beer on the wall. 577 bottles of beer on the wall. 577 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 576 bottles of beer on the wall. 576 bottles of beer on the wall. 576 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 575 bottles of beer on the wall. 575 bottles of beer on the wall. 575 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 574 bottles of beer on the wall. 574 bottles of beer on the wall. 574 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 573 bottles of beer on the wall. 573 bottles of beer on the wall. 573 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 572 bottles of beer on the wall. 572 bottles of beer on the wall. 572 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there is 571 bottles of beer on the wall. 571 bottles of beer on the wall. 571 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 570 bottles of beer on the wall. 570 bottles of beer on the wall. 570 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 569 bottles of beer on the wall. 569 bottles of beer on the wall. 569 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there's 568 bottles of beer on the wall. 568 bottles of beer on the wall. 568 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 567 bottles of beer on the wall. 567 bottles of beer on the wall. 567 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 566 bottles of beer on the wall. 566 bottles of beer on the wall. 566 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 560 bottles of beer on the wall. 565 bottles of beer on the wall. 565 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. 564 bottles of beer on the wall. 564 bottles of beer on the wall. 564 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now there is 563 bottles of beer on the wall. 563 bottles of beer on the wall. 563 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Now 562 bottles of beer on the wall. 562 bottles of beer on the wall. 562 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Another 561 bottles of beer on the wall. 561 bottles of beer on the wall. 561 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Another 560 bottles of beer on the wall. 560 bottles of beer on the wall. 560 bottles of beer. Take one down. Pass it around. Another 559 bottles of beer on the wall. 559 bottles of beer on the wall. 559 bottles of beer. Take one down. down, pass it around now to 558 bottles of beer on the wall, 558 bottles of beer on the wall, 558 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 557 bottles of beer on the wall, 557 bottles of beer on the wall, 557 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 556 bottles of beer on the wall, 552 bottles of beer on the wall, 556 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 555 bottles of beer on the wall, 555 bottles of beer on the wall, 554 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 554 bottles of beer on the wall, 554 bottles of beer on the wall, 554 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 553 bottles of beer on the wall, 553 bottles of beer on the wall, 552 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 552 bottles of beer on the wall, 552 bottles of beer on the wall, 552 bottles of beer, 500. Take one down, pass it around now to 551 bottles of beer on the 551 bottles of beer on the 551 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 550 bottles of beer on the wall, 550 bottles of beer on the wall, 550 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 549 bottles of beer on the wall, 549 bottles of beer on the wall, 549 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. 448 bottles of beer on the wall, 548 bottles of beer on the wall, 548 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. 447 bottles of beer on the wall, 547 bottles of beer on the wall, 547 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 546 bottles of beer on the wall, 546 bottles of beer on the wall, 546 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 545 bottles of beer on the wall, 545 bottles of beer on the wall, 545 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 544 bottles of beer on the wall, 544 bottles of beer on the wall, 544 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 543 bottles of beer on the wall, 543 bottles of beer on the wall, 543 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now to 542 bottles of beer on the wall, 542 bottles of beer on the wall, 542 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 542 bottles of beer on the wall, 542 bottles of beer on the wall, 542 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 541 bottles of beer on the wall, 541 bottles of beer on the wall, 541 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 540 bottles of beer on the wall, 540 bottles of beer on the wall, 540 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 539 bottles of beer on the wall, 539 bottles of beer on the wall, 539 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 530 bottles of beer on the wall, 530 bottles of beer on the wall, 530 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 537 bottles of beer on the wall, 537 bottles of beer on the wall, 537 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 536 bottles of beer on the wall, 536 bottles of beer on the wall, 536 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 535 bottles of beer on the wall, 535 bottles of beer on the wall, 535 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 534 bottles of beer on the wall, 534 bottles of beer on the wall, 534 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There is 433 bottles of beer on the wall, 533 bottles of beer on the wall, 533 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. 532 bottles of beer on the wall, 532 bottles of beer on the wall, 532 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. 531 bottles of beer on the wall, 531 bottles of beer on the wall, 531 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 530 bottles of beer on the wall, 530 bottles of beer on the wall, 530 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 529 bottles of beer on the wall, 529 bottles of beer on the wall, 529 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 528 bottles of beer on the wall, 528 bottles of beer on the wall, 528 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 527 bottles of beer on the wall, 527 bottles of beer on the wall, 527 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 526 bottles of beer on the wall, 526 bottles of beer on the wall, 526 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around out to 525 bottles of beer on the wall, 525 bottles of beer on the wall, 525 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 524 bottles of beer on the wall, 524 bottles of beer on the wall, 524 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 523 bottles of beer on the wall, 523 bottles of beer on the wall, 523 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 522 bottles of beer on the wall, 522 bottles of beer on the wall, 522 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 521 bottles of beer on the wall, 521 bottles of beer on the wall, 521 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 520 bottles of beer on the wall, 520 bottles of beer on the wall, 520 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 519 bottles of beer on the wall, 519 bottles of beer on the wall, 519 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 518 bottles of beer on the wall, 518 bottles of beer on the wall, 518 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 517 bottles of beer on the wall, 517 bottles of beer on the wall, 517 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 516 bottles of beer on the wall, 516 bottles of beer on the wall, 560 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 515 bottles of beer on the wall, 515 bottles of beer on the wall, 515 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 514 bottles of beer on the wall, 514 bottles of beer on the wall, 514 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 413 bottles of beer on the wall, 513 bottles of beer on the wall, 513 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 512 bottles of beer on the wall, 512 bottles of beer on the wall, 512 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 511 bottles of beer on the wall, 511 bottles of beer on the wall, 511 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 510 bottles of beer on the wall. 510 bottles of beer on the wall, 510 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 509 bottles of beer on the wall, 509 bottles of beer on the wall, 509 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 508 bottles of beer on the wall, 508 bottles of beer on the wall, 508 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 507 bottles of beer on the wall, 507 bottles of beer on the wall, 507 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around until there's 506 bottles of beer on the wall, 506 bottles of beer on the wall, 506 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now so it's 505 505 bottles of beer on the wall, 505 bottles of beer on the wall, 505 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 504 bottles of beer on the wall, 504 bottles of beer, 504 bottles of beer on the wall, 504 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 503 bottles of beer on the wall, 503 bottles of beer on the wall, 503 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 502 bottles of beer on the wall, 502 bottles of beer on the wall, 502 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 501 bottles of beer on the wall, 501 bottles of beer on the wall, 501 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 500 bottles of beer on the fucking wall. Ugh.
Breathe, monk.
500 bottles of beer on the wall, 500 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 499 bottles of beer on the wall, 499 bottles of beer on the wall, 499 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 498 bottles of beer on the wall, 498 bottles of beer on the wall, 498 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now to 497 bottles of beer on the wall, 497 bottles of beer on the wall, 497 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 496 bottles of beer on the wall, 496 bottles of beer on the wall, 496 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 495 bottles of beer on the wall, 495 bottles of beer on the wall, 495 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 494 bottles of beer on the wall, 494 bottles of beer on the wall, 494 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 493 bottles of beer on the wall, 493 bottles of beer on the wall, 493 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 492 bottles of beer on the wall, 492 bottles of beer on the wall, 492 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 491 bottles of beer on the wall, 491 bottles of beer on the wall, 491 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 490 bottles of beer on the wall, 490 bottles of beer on the wall, 490 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 489 bottles of beer on the wall, 489 bottles of beer on the wall, 489 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 488 bottles of beer on the wall, 488 bottles of beer on the wall, 488 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 487 bottles of beer on the wall, 487 bottles of beer on the wall, 487 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 486 bottles of beer on the wall, 486 bottles of beer on the wall, 486 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 485 bottles of beer on the wall, 485 bottles of beer on the wall, 485 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 484 bottles of beer on the wall, 484 bottles of beer on the wall, 484 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 483 bottles of beer on the wall, 483 bottles of beer on the wall, 483 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 482 bottles of beer on the wall, 482 bottles of beer on the wall, 482 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 481 bottles of beer on the wall, 481 bottles of beer on the wall, 481 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 480 bottles of beer on the wall, 480 bottles of beer on the wall, 480 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 479 bottles of beer on the wall, 479 bottles of beer on the wall, 479 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 478 bottles of beer on the wall, 478 bottles of beer on the wall, 478 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 477 bottles of beer on the wall, 477 bottles of beer on the wall, 477 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 476 bottles of beer on the wall, 476 bottles of beer on the wall, 476 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 475 bottles of beer on the wall, 475 bottles of beer on the wall, 475 bottles of beer on the wall. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 474 bottles of beer on the wall, 474 bottles of beer on the wall, 474 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 473 bottles of beer on the wall, 473 bottles of beer on the wall, 473 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now the 472 bottles of beer on the wall, 472 bottles of beer on the wall, 472 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now the 471 bottles of beer on the wall, 471 bottles of beer on the wall, 471 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now the 470 bottles of beer on the wall, 470 bottles of beer on the wall, 470 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 469 bottles of beer on the wall, 469 bottles of beer on the wall, 469 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 468 bottles of beer on the wall, 468 bottles of beer on the wall, 468 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 467 bottles of beer on the wall, 467 bottles of beer on the wall, 467 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 466 bottles of beer on the wall, 466 bottles of beer on the wall, 466 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 465 bottles of beer on the wall, 465 bottles of beer on the wall, 465 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 464 bottles of beer on the wall, 464 bottles of beer on the wall, 464 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 463 bottles of beer on the wall, 463 bottles of beer on the wall, 463 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 462 bottles of beer on the wall, 462 bottles of beer on the wall, 462 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 461 bottles of beer on the wall, 461 bottles of beer on the wall, 461 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 460 bottles of beer on the wall, 460 bottles of beer on the wall, 460 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 459 bottles of beer on the wall, 459 bottles of beer on the wall, 459 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 450 8 bottles of beer on the wall, 458 bottles of beer on the wall, 458 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 457 bottles of beer on the wall, 457 bottles of beer on the wall, 457 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 456 bottles of beer on the wall, 456 bottles of beer on the wall, 456 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 455 bottles of beer on the wall, 455 bottles of beer on the wall, 455 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now it's 454 bottles of beer on the wall, 454 bottles of beer on the wall, 454 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 452 bottles of beer on the wall, 452 bottles of beer on the wall, 452 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 452 bottles of beer on the wall, 452 bottles of beer on the wall, 452 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 451 bottles of beer on the wall, 451 bottles of beer on the wall, 451 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 450 bottles of beer on the wall, 450 bottles of beer on the wall, 450 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 449 bottles of beer on the wall. 449 bottles of beer on the wall, 449 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 448 bottles of beer on the wall, 448 bottles of beer on the wall, 448 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. To 447 bottles of beer on the wall, 447 bottles of beer on the wall, 447 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. To 446 bottles of beer on the wall, 446 bottles of beer on the wall, 446 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 445 bottles of beer on the wall, 445 bottles of beer on the wall, 445 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 444 bottles of beer on the wall, 444 bottles of beer on the wall, 444 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 443 bottles of beer on the wall, 443 bottles of beer on the wall, 443 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 442 bottles of beer on the wall, 442 bottles of beer on the wall, 442 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 441 bottles of beer on the wall, 441 bottles of beer on the wall, 441 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 440 bottles of beer on the wall, 440 bottles of beer on the wall, 440 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 439 bottles of beer on the wall. 439 bottles of beer on the wall, 439 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Another 438 bottles of beer on the wall, 438 bottles of beer on the wall, 438 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 437 bottles of beer on the wall, 437 bottles of beer on the wall, 437 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 436 bottles of beer on the wall, 436 bottles of beer on the wall, 436 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 435 bottles of beer on the wall, 435 bottles of beer on the wall, 435 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 434 bottles of beer on the wall, 434 bottles of beer on the wall, 434 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 432 bottles of beer on the wall, 432 bottles of beer on the wall, 433 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 432 bottles of beer on the wall, 432 bottles of beer on the wall, 432 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 431 bottles of beer on the wall, 431 bottles of beer on the wall, 431 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 430 bottles of beer on the wall, 430 bottles of beer on the wall, 430 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 429 bottles of beer on the wall, 429 bottles of beer on the wall, 429 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 428 bottles of beer on the wall, 428 bottles of beer, 428 bottles of beer on the wall, 428 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 427 bottles of beer on the wall, 427 bottles of beer on the wall, 427 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 426 bottles of beer on the wall, 426 bottles of beer on the wall, 426 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 425 bottles of beer on the wall, 425 bottles of beer on the wall, 425 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 424 bottles of beer on the wall, 424 bottles of beer on the wall, 424 bottles of beer. 425 bottles of beer on the wall, 425 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 424 bottles of beer on the wall, 424 bottles of beer on the wall, 425 bottles of beer on the wall, 425 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 424 bottles of beer on the wall, 424 bottles of beer on the wall, 424 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 423 bottles of beer on the wall, 423 bottles of beer on the wall, 423 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 422 bottles of beer on the wall, 422 bottles of beer on the wall, 422 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 421 bottles of beer on the wall, 421 bottles of beer on the wall, 421 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 420 bottles of beer on the wall, 420 bottles of beer on the wall, 420 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 419 bottles of beer on the wall, 419 bottles of beer on the wall, 419 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now it's 418 bottles of beer on the wall, 418 bottles of beer on the wall, 418 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now it's 417 bottles of beer on the wall, 417 bottles of beer on the wall, 417 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now it's 416 bottles of beer on the wall, 416 bottles of beer on the wall, 416 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 415 bottles of beer on the wall, 415 bottles of beer on the wall, 450 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 414 bottles of beer on the wall, 414 bottles of beer on the wall, 414 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 413 bottles of beer on the wall, 413 bottles of beer on the wall, 413 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 412 bottles of beer on the wall, 412 bottles of beer on the wall, 412 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now that's 411 bottles of beer on the wall, 411 bottles of beer on the wall, 411 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 410 bottles of beer on the wall, 410 bottles of beer on the wall, 410 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 409 bottles of beer on the wall, 409 bottles of beer on the wall, 409 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around 408 bottles of beer on the wall, 408 bottles of beer on the wall, 408 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 470 bottles of beer on the wall, 407 bottles of beer on the wall, 407 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 406 bottles of beer on the wall, 406 bottles of beer on the wall, 406 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 405 bottles of beer on the wall, 405 bottles of beer on the wall, 405 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around another 404 bottles of beer on the wall, 404 bottles of beer on the wall, 404 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 403 bottles of beer on the wall, 43 bottles of beer on the wall, 43 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 402 bottles of beer on the wall, 42 bottles of beer on the wall, 42 bottles of beer. For take one down, pass it around. There's 401 bottles of beer on the wall, 401 bottles of beer on the wall, 401 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 400 bottles of beer on the wall. We have made it to 400.
Oh,
400 bottles of beer on the wall, 400 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 399 bottles of beer on the wall, 399 bottles of beer on the wall, 399 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 390 bottles of beer on the wall, 390 bottles of beer on the wall, 390 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 397 bottles of beer on the wall, 397 bottles of beer on the wall, 397 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 396 bottles of beer on the wall, 396 bottles of beer on the wall, 396 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 395 bottles of beer on the wall, 395 bottles of beer on the wall, 395 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 394 bottles of beer on the wall, 394 bottles of beer on the wall, 394 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 393 bottles of beer on the wall, 293 bottles of beer on the wall, 293 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 292 bottles of beer on the wall, 292 bottles of beer on the wall, 292 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 391 bottles of beer on the wall, 291 bottles of beer on the wall, 291 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 290 bottles of beer on the wall, 389 bottles of beer on the wall, 389 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass around. Another 388 bottles of beer on the wall, 388 bottles of beer on the wall, 388 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 387 bottles of beer on the wall, 387 bottles of beer on the wall, 387 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 386 bottles of beer on the wall, 386 bottles of beer on the wall, 386 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That is 385 bottles of beer on the wall, 385 bottles of beer on the wall, 385 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 384 bottles of beer on the wall, 384 bottles of beer on the wall, 384 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 383 bottles of beer on the wall, 383 bottles of beer on the wall, 383 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 382 bottles of beer on the wall, 382 bottles of beer on the wall, 382 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 381 bottles of beer on the wall, 381 bottles of beer on the wall, 381 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 380 bottles of beer on the wall, 380 bottles of beer on the wall, 380 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 379 bottles of beer on the wall, 379 bottles of beer on the wall, 379 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 378 bottles of beer on the wall, 378 bottles of beer on the wall, 378 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 377 bottles of beer on the wall, 377 bottles of beer on the wall, 377 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 376 bottles of beer on the wall, 376 bottles of beer on the wall, 376 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 375 bottles of beer on the wall, 375 bottles of beer on the wall, 375 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 374 bottles of beer on the wall, 374 bottles of beer on the wall, 374 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 373 bottles of beer on the wall, 373 bottles of beer on the wall, 373 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 372 bottles of beer on the wall, 372 bottles of beer on the wall, 372 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 371 bottles of beer on the wall, 371 bottles of beer on the wall, 371 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 370 bottles of beer on the wall, 370 bottles of beer on the wall, 370 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 369 bottles of beer on the wall, 369 bottles of beer on the wall, 369 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 368 bottles of beer on the wall, 368 bottles of beer on the wall, 368 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 367 bottles of beer on the wall, 367 bottles of beer on the wall, 367 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 366 bottles of beer on the wall, 366 bottles of beer on the wall, 366 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 365 bottles of beer on the wall, 365 bottles of beer on the wall, 365 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 364 bottles of beer on the wall, 364 bottles of beer on the wall, 364 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 363 bottles of beer on the wall, 363 bottles of beer on the wall, 363 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 362 bottles of beer on the wall, 362 bottles of beer on the wall, 362 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 361 bottles of beer on the wall, 361 bottles of beer on the wall, 361 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. To 360 bottles of beer on the wall, 360 bottles of beer on the wall, 360 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 359 bottles of beer on the wall, 359 bottles of beer on the wall, 359 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 358 bottles of beer on the wall, 358 bottles of beer on the wall, 358 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 357 bottles of beer on the wall, 357 bottles of beer on the wall, 357 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 356 bottles of beer on the wall, 356 bottles of beer on the wall, 356 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 355 bottles of beer on the wall. Now 355 bottles of beer on the wall, 355 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 354 bottles of beer on the wall, 354 bottles of beer on the wall, 354 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 353 bottles of beer on the wall, 353 bottles of beer on the wall, 353 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 352 bottles of beer on the wall, 352 bottles of beer on the wall, 352 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 351 bottles of beer on the wall, 351 bottles of beer on the wall, 351 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 350 bottles of beer on the wall, 350 bottles of beer on the wall, 350 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 349 bottles of beer on the wall, 349 bottles of beer on the wall, 349 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 348 bottles of beer on the wall, 348 bottles of beer on the wall, 348 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 347 bottles of beer on the wall, 247 bottles of beer on the wall, 247 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 346 bottles of 346 bottles of beer on the wall, 346 bottles of beer on the wall, 346 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 345 bottles of beer on the wall, 345 bottles of beer on the wall, 345 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 344 bottles of beer on the wall, 344 bottles of beer on the wall, 344 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 343 bottles of beer on the wall, 343 bottles of beer on the wall, 343 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 342 bottles of beer on the wall, 342 bottles of beer on the wall, 342 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 341 bottles of beer at the wall, 341 bottles of beer on the wall, 341 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around to 340 bottles of beer on the wall, 340 bottles of beer on the wall, 340 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 339 bottles of beer on the wall, 339 bottles of beer on the wall, 339 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 338 bottles of beer on the wall, 338 bottles of beer on the wall, 338 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 337 bottles of beer on the wall, 337 bottles of beer on the wall, 337 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 336 bottles of beer on the wall, 336 bottles of beer on the wall, 336 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 336 bottles of beer on the wall, 336 bottles of beer on the wall, 336 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around as 335 bottles of beer on the wall, 335 bottles of beer on the wall, 235 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now, 334 bottles of beer on the wall, 334 bottles of beer on the wall, 334 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 333 bottles of beer on the wall, 333 bottles of beer on the wall, 333 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 332 bottles of beer on the wall, 332 bottles of beer on the wall, 332 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 331 bottles of beer on the wall, 331 bottles of beer on the wall, 331 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 330 bottles of beer on the wall, 330 bottles of beer on the wall, 330 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now it's 329 bottles of beer on the wall, 329 bottles of beer on the wall, 329 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now it's 328 bottles of beer on the wall, 328 bottles of beer on the wall, 328 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now it's 327 bottles of beer on the wall, 327 bottles of beer on the wall, 327 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now there's 326 bottles of beer on the wall, 326 bottles of beer on the wall, 326 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now there's 325 bottles of beer on the wall, 325 bottles of beer on the wall, 325 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 324 bottles of beer on the wall, 324 bottles of beer on the wall, 324 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 323 bottles of beer on the wall, 323 bottles of beer on the wall, 323 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 322 bottles of beer on the wall, 322 bottles of beer on the wall, 322 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 321 bottles of beer on the wall, 321 bottles of beer on the wall, 321 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 320 bottles of beer on the wall, 320 bottles of beer on the wall, 320 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 319 bottles of beer on the wall, 319 bottles of beer on the wall, 319 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 318 bottles of beer on the wall, 318 bottles of beer on the wall, 318 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, there's 317 bottles of beer on the wall, 317 bottles of beer on the wall, 317 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now there's 316 bottles of beer on the wall, 316 bottles of beer on the wall, 316 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, 315 bottles of beer on the wall, 315 bottles of beer on the wall, 315 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, now this 314 bottles of beer on 314 bottles of beer on 314 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. It's 313 bottles of beer on the wall, 313 bottles of beer on the wall, 313 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. There's 312 bottles of beer on the wall, 312 bottles of beer on the wall, 312 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around now. 311 bottles of beer on the wall, 311 bottles of beer on 311 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 310 bottles of beer on the wall, 310 bottles of beer on the wall, 310 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 309 bottles of beer on the wall, 309 bottles of beer on the wall, 309 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 308 bottles of beer on the wall, 308 bottles of beer on the wall, 308 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 307 bottles of beer on the wall, 307 bottles of beer on the wall, 307 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 306 bottles of beer on the wall, 306 bottles of beer on the wall, 306 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 305 bottles of beer on the wall, 305 bottles of beer on the wall, 305 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 304 bottles of beer on the wall, 304 bottles of beer on the wall, 304 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 303 bottles of beer on the wall, 303 bottles of beer on the wall, 303 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 302 bottles of beer on the wall, 302 bottles of beer on the wall, 302 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 301 bottles of beer on the wall, 301 bottles of beer on the wall, 301 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around, that's 300 bottles of beer on the wall. 300 bottles of beer on the wall, 300 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 299 bottles of beer on the wall, 299 bottles of beer on the wall, 299 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 298 bottles of beer on the wall, 298 bottles of beer on the wall, 298 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 297 bottles of beer on the wall, 297 bottles of beer on the wall, 297 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 296 bottles of beer on the wall. That's 296 bottles of beer on the wall, 296 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 295 bottles of beer on the 295 bottles of beer on the 295 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 294 bottles of beer on the 294 bottles of beer on the 294 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 293 bottles of beer on the 293 bottles of beer on the 293 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 292 bottles of beer on the 292 bottles of beer on the 292 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 291 bottles of beer on the wall. 291 bottles of beer on the wall, 291 bottles of beer on the wall. Take one down, pass it around. 290 bottles of beer on the wall, 290 bottles of beer on the wall, 290 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 289 bottles of beer on the wall, 289 bottles of beer on the wall, 289 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 288 bottles of beer on the wall, 288 bottles of beer on the wall, 288 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 287 bottles of beer on the wall, 287 bottles of beer on the wall, 287 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 286 bottles of beer on the wall, 286 bottles of beer on the wall, 286 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 285 bottles of beer on the wall, 285 bottles of beer on the wall, 285 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 284 bottles of beer on the wall, 284 bottles of beer on the wall, 284 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 283 bottles of beer on the wall, 283 bottles of beer on the wall, 283 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 282 bottles of beer on the wall, 282 bottles of beer on the wall, 282 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 281 bottles of beer on the wall, 281 bottles of beer on the wall, 281 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 280 bottles of beer on the wall, 280 bottles of beer on the wall, 280 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 279 bottles of beer on the wall, 279 bottles of beer on the wall, 279 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 278 bottles of beer on the wall, 278 bottles of beer on the wall, 278 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 277 bottles of beer on the wall, 777 bottles of beer on the wall, 277 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 276 bottles of beer on the wall, 276 bottles of beer on the wall, 276 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 275 bottles of beer on the wall, 275 bottles of beer on the wall, 275 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 274 bottles of beer on the wall, 274 bottles of beer on the wall, 274 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 273 bottles of beer on the wall, 273 bottles of beer on the wall, 273 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 272 bottles of beer on the wall, 272 bottles of beer on the wall, 272 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 271 bottles of beer on the wall, 271 bottles of beer on the wall, 271 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 270 bottles of beer on the wall, 270 bottles of beer on the wall, 270 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 269 bottles of beer on the wall, 269 bottles of beer on the wall, 269 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 268 bottles of beer on the wall, 268 bottles of beer on the wall, 268 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 267 bottles of beer on the wall, 267 bottles of beer on the wall, 267 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 266 bottles of beer on the wall, 266 bottles of beer on the wall, 266 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 265 bottles of beer on the wall, 265 bottles of beer on the wall, 265 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 264 bottles of beer on the wall, 264 bottles of beer on the wall, 264 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 263 bottles of beer on the wall, 263 bottles of beer on the wall, 263 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 262 bottles of beer on the wall, 262 bottles of beer on the wall, 262 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 261 bottles of beer on the wall, 261 bottles of beer on the wall, 261 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 260 bottles of beer on the wall, 260 bottles of beer on the wall, 260 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 259 bottles of beer on the wall, 259 bottles of beer on the wall, 259 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 258 bottles of beer on the wall, 258 bottles of beer on the wall, 258 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 257 bottles of beer on the wall, 257 bottles of beer on the wall, 257 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 256 bottles of beer on the wall, 256 bottles of beer on the wall, 256 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 255 bottles of beer on the wall, 255 bottles of beer on the wall, 255 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now that's 254 bottles of beer on the wall, 254 bottles of beer on the wall, 254 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 253 bottles of beer on the wall, 253 bottles of beer on the wall, 253 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 252 bottles of beer on the wall, 252 bottles of beer on the wall, 252 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 251 bottles of beer on the wall, 251 bottles of beer on the wall, 251 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 250 bottles of beer on the wall, 250 bottles of beer on the wall, 250 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 249 bottles of beer on the wall, 249 bottles of beer on the wall, 249 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 248 bottles of beer on the wall, 248 bottles of beer on the wall. Fuck me, 248 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 247 bottles of beer on the wall, 247 bottles of beer on the wall, 247 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 246 bottles of beer on the wall, 246 bottles of beer on the wall, 246 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 245 bottles of beer on the wall, 245 bottles of beer on the wall, 245 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 243 bottles of beer on the wall, 243 bottles of beer on the wall, 243 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 242 bottles of beer on the wall, 242 bottles of beer on the wall, 242 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 241 bottles of beer on the wall, 241 bottles of beer on the wall, 241 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 240 bottles of beer on the wall, 240 bottles of beer on the wall, 240 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 239 bottles of beer on the wall, 239 bottles of beer on the wall, 239 bottles of beer. 239. 239 bottles of beer on the wall, 239 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 238 bottles of beer on the wall, 238 bottles of beer on the wall, 238 bottles of beer. 230 bottles of beer on the wall, 238 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 237 bottles of beer on the wall, 237 bottles of beer on the wall, 237 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 236 bottles of beer on the wall, 236 bottles of beer on the wall, 236 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 235 bottles of beer on the wall, 235 bottles of beer on the wall, 234 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 234 bottles of beer on the wall, 234 bottles of beer on the wall, 234 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 233 bottles of beer on the wall, 233 bottles of beer on the wall, 233 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 232 bottles of beer on the wall, 232 bottles of beer on the wall, 232 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 231 bottles of beer on the wall, 231 bottles of beer on the wall, 231 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 230 bottles of beer on the wall, 230 bottles of beer on the wall, 230 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That is 229 bottles of beer on the wall, 229 bottles of beer on the wall, 229 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 228 bottles of beer on the wall, 228 bottles of beer on the wall, 228 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 227 bottles of beer on the wall, 227 bottles of beer on the wall, 227 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 226 bottles of beer on the wall, 226 bottles of beer on the wall, 226 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 225 bottles of beer on the wall, 225 bottles of beer on the wall, 225 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 224 bottles of beer on the wall, 224 bottles of beer on the wall, 224 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 223 bottles of beer on the wall, 223 bottles of beer on the wall, 223 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 222 bottles of beer on the wall, 222 bottles of beer on the wall, 222 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 221 bottles of beer on the wall, 221 bottles of beer on the wall, 221 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 220 bottles of beer on the 220 bottles of beer on the wall, 220 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 219 bottles of beer on the wall, 219 bottles of beer on the wall, 219 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 218 bottles of beer on the wall, 218 bottles of beer on the wall, 218 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 217 bottles of beer on the wall, 217 bottles of beer on the wall, 217 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 260 bottles of beer on the wall, 260 bottles of beer on the wall, 260 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 215 bottles of beer on the wall, 250 bottles of beer on the wall, 250 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 214 bottles of beer on the wall, 214 bottles of beer on the wall, 214 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 213 bottles of beer on the wall, 213 bottles of beer on the wall, 213 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 212 bottles of beer on the wall, 212 bottles of beer on the wall, 212 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 211 bottles of beer on the wall, 211 bottles of beer on the wall, 211 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 210 bottles of beer on the wall, 210 bottles of beer on the wall, 210 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 209 bottles of beer on the wall, 209 bottles of beer on the wall, 209 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 208 bottles of beer on the wall, 208 bottles of beer on the wall, 208 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 207 bottles of beer on the wall, 207 bottles of beer on the wall, 207 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 206 bottles of beer on the wall, 206 bottles of beer on the wall, 206 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 205 bottles of beer on the wall, 205 bottles of beer on the wall, 205 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 204 bottles of beer on the wall, 204 bottles of beer on the wall, 204 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 23 bottles of beer on the wall, 23 bottles of beer on the wall, 23 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 202 bottles of beer on the wall, 202 bottles of beer on the wall, 202 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 201 bottles of beer on the wall, 201 bottles of beer on the wall, 201 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 200 bottles of beer on the gosh darn wall. 200 bottles of beer on the wall, 200 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 199 bottles of beer on the wall, 199 bottles of beer on the wall, 199 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 198 bottles of beer. Beer on the wall, 198 bottles of beer on the wall, 198 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 197 bottles of beer on the wall, 197 bottles of beer on the wall, 197 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 196 bottles of beer on the wall, 196 bottles of beer on the wall, 196 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 195 bottles of beer on the wall, 195 bottles of beer on the wall, 195 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 100 and 94 bottles of beer on the wall, 194 bottles of beer on the wall, 194 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 193 bottles of beer on the wall, 193 bottles of beer on the wall, 193 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 192 bottles of beer on the wall, 192 bottles of beer on the wall, 192 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 191 bottles of beer on the wall, 191 bottles of beer on the wall, 191 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 190 bottles of beer on the wall, 190 bottles of beer on the wall, 190 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 189 bottles of beer on the wall, 189 bottles of beer on the wall, 189 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 188 bottles of beer on the wall, 188 bottles of beer on the wall, 188 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 187 bottles of beer on the wall, 187 bottles of beer on the wall, 187 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 186 bottles of beer on the wall, 186 bottles of beer on the wall, 186 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 185 bottles of beer on the wall, 185 bottles of beer on the wall, 185 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 184 bottles of beer on the wall, 184 bottles of beer on the wall, 184 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 183 bottles of beer on the wall, 183 bottles of beer on the wall, 183 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 182 bottles of beer on the wall, 182 bottles of beer on the wall, 182 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 181 bottles of beer on the wall, 181 bottles of beer on the wall, 181 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 180 bottles of beer on the wall, 180 bottles of beer on the wall, 180 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now was 179 bottles of beer now, 179 bottles of beer on the wall, 179 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass them around. Now there's 178 bottles of beer on the wall, 178 bottles of beer on the wall, 178 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 177 bottles of beer on the wall, 177 bottles of beer on the wall, 177 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 176 bottles of beer on the wall, 176 bottles of beer on the wall, 176 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 175 bottles of beer on the wall, 175 bottles of beer on the wall, 175 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 174 bottles of beer on the wall, 174 bottles of beer on the wall, 174 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 173 bottles of beer on the wall, 173 bottles of beer on the wall, 173 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 172 bottles of beer on the wall, 172 bottles of beer on the wall, 172 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 171 bottles of beer on the wall, 171 bottles of beer on the wall, 171 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 170 bottles of beer on the wall, 170 bottles of beer on the wall, 170 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 169 bottles of beer on the wall, 169 bottles of beer on the wall, 169 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 168 bottles of beer on the wall, 168 bottles of beer on the wall, 168 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 167 bottles of beer on the wall, 167 bottles of beer on the wall, 167 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 166 bottles of beer on the wall, 166 bottles of beer on the wall, 166 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 165 bottles of beer on the wall, 165 bottles of beer on the wall, 165 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 164 bottles of beer on the wall, 164 bottles of beer, 164 bottles of beer on the wall, 164 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 160 bottles of beer on the wall, 160 bottles. Was it 63 bottles of beer on the wall, 163 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 162 bottles of beer on the wall, 162 bottles of beer on the wall, 162 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 161 bottles of beer on the wall, 161 bottles of beer on the wall, 161 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 160 bottles of beer on the wall, 160 bottles of beer on the wall, 160 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 159 bottles of beer on the wall, 159 bottles of beer on the wall, 159 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 150 bottles of beer on the wall, 158 bottles of beer on the wall, 158 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. One down, there's 157 bottles of beer on the ground. 157 bottles of beer on the wall, 157 bottles of beer on the wall, 157 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 156 bottles of beer on the wall, 156 bottles of beer on the wall, 156 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 154 bottles of beer on the wall, 154 bottles of beer on the wall, 154 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 153 bottles of beer on the wall, 152 bottles of beer on the wall, 152 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 152 bottles of beer on the wall, 152 bottles of beer on the wall, 152 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 151 bottles of beer on the wall, 151 bottles of beer on the wall, 151 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 150 bottles of beer on the wall, 150 bottles of beer on the wall, 150 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 149 bottles of beer on the wall, 149 bottles of beer on the wall, 149 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 148 bottles of beer on the wall, 148 bottles of beer on the wall, 148 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 147 bottles of beer on the wall, 147 bottles of beer on the wall, 147 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass them around. Now there's 146 bottles of beer on the wall, 146 bottles of beer on the wall, 146 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass them around. That's 145 bottles of beer on the wall, 145 bottles of beer on the wall, 145 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass them around. That's 144 bottles of beer on the wall, 144 bottles of beer on the wall, 144 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That was 143 bottles of beer on the wall, 143 bottles of beer on the wall, 143 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now it's 142 bottles of beer on the wall, 142 bottles of beer on the wall, 142 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 141 bottles of beer on the wall. 141 bottles of beer on the wall. 141 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 140 bottles of beer on the wall. 140 bottles of beer on the wall. 140 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 139 bottles of beer on the wall. 139 bottles of beer on the wall. 139 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 138 bottles of beer on the wall. 138 bottles of beer on the wall. 138 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 137 bottles of beer on the wall. 137 bottles of beer on the 137 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 136 bottles of beer on the 136 bottles of beer on the 136 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 135 bottles of beer on the 135 bottles of beer on the 135 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 134 bottles of beer on the wall. 134 bottles of beer on the wall. 134 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 133 bottles of beer on the wall. 133 bottles of beer on the wall. 133 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 132 bottles of beer on the wall. 132 bottles of beer on the wall with 132 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 131 bottles of beer on the 131 bottles of beer on the 131 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 130 bottles of beer on the 130 bottles of beer on the 130 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 129 bottles of beer on the 129 bottles of beer on the 129 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 128 bottles of beer on the 128 bottles of beer on the 128 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 127 bottles of beer on the 127 bottles of beer on the wall. 127 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 126 bottles of beer on the wall. 126 bottles of beer on the 126 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 125 bottles of beer on the 125 bottles of beer on the wall. 125 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 124 bottles of beer on the wall. 124 bottles of beer on 124 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 123 bottles of beer on 123 bottles of beer on the wall. 123 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 122 bottles of beer on the wall. 122 bottles of beer on 122 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 121 bottles of beer on the wall. 121 bottles of beer on the wall. 121 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 120 bottles of beer on the wall. 120 bottles of beer on the wall. 120 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 119 bottles of beer on the wall. 119 bottles of beer on the wall. 119 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 118 bottles of beer on the wall. 118 bottles of beer on the wall. 118 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 117 bottles of beer on the 117 bottles of beer on the 117 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 116 bottles of beer on the 160 bottles of beer on the 160 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 115 bottles of beer on the 115 bottles of beer on the 150 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 114 bottles of beer on the 114 bottles of beer on the 114 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 113 bottles of beer on the 113 bottles of beer on the 113 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there is 112 bottles of beer on the 112 bottles of beer on the wall. 112 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now what is 111 bottles of beer on the 111 bottles of beer on the 111 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 110 bottles of beer on the wall. 110 bottles of beer on the wall. 110 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 109 bottles of beer on the wall. 109 bottles of beer on the wall. 109 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 108 bottles of beer on the wall. 108 bottles of beer on the wall. 108 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 170 bottles of beer. 107 bottles of beer on the wall. 107 bottles of beer on the wall. 107 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 106 bottles of beer on the wall. 106 bottles of beer on the wall. 106 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 105 bottles of beer on the 105 bottles of beer on the 105 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 104 bottles of beer on the wall. 104 bottles of beer on the 104 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 103 bottles of beer on the 103 bottles of beer on the wall. 103 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 100. Now there's 102 bottles of beer on the 102 bottles of beer on the 102 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 101 bottles of beer on the wall. 101 bottles of beer on the wall. 101 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now we're at 100 bottles of beer on the wall. The home stretch. 100 bottles of beer on the wall. 100 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 99 bottles of beer on the wall. 99 bottles of beer on the wall. 99 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 98 bottles of beer on the wall. 98 bottles of beer on the wall. 98 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 97 bottles of beer on the wall. 97 bottles of beer on the wall. 97 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 96 bottles of beer on the wall. 96 bottles of beer on the wall. 96 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 95 bottles of beer on the wall. 95 bottles of beer on the wall. 95 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 94 bottles of beer on the wall. 94 bottles of beer on the wall. 94 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 93 bottles of beer on the wall. 93 bottles of beer on the wall. 93 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 92 bottles of beer on the wall. 92 bottles of beer on the wall. 92 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 91 bottles of beer on the wall. 91 bottles of beer on the wall. 91 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 90 bottles of beer on the wall. beer on the wall. 90 bottles of beer on the wall. 90 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 89 bottles of beer on the wall. 89 bottles of beer on the wall. 89 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 88 bottles of beer on the wall. 88 bottles of beer on the wall. 88 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 87 bottles of beer on the wall. 87 bottles of beer on the wall. 87 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 86 bottles of beer on the wall. 86 bottles of beer on the wall. 86 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 85 bottles of beer on the wall. 85 bottles of beer on the wall. 85 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 84 bottles of beer on the wall. 84 bottles of beer on the wall. 84 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 83 bottles of beer on the wall. 83 bottles of beer on the wall. 83 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 82 bottles of beer on the wall. 82 bottles of beer on the wall. 82 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 81 bottles of beer on the wall. 81 bottles of beer on the wall. 81 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 80 bottles of beer on the wall. 80 bottles of beer on the wall. 80 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 79 bottles of beer on the wall. 79 bottles of beer on the wall. 79 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 78 bottles of beer on the wall. 78 bottles of beer on the wall. 78 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 77 bottles of beer on the wall. 77 bottles of beer on the wall. 77 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 6 bottles of beer on the wall, 6 bottles of beer on the wall, 76 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 75 bottles of beer on the wall, 75 bottles of beer on the wall, 75 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 74 bottles of beer on the wall, 74 bottles of beer on the wall, 74 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 73 bottles of beer on the wall, 73 bottles of beer on the wall, 73 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 72 bottles of beer on the wall, 72 bottles of beer on the wall, 72 bottles of beer on the wall. Take one down, pass it around. Now 71 bottles of beer on the wall, 71 bottles of beer on the wall, 71 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 70 bottles of beer on the wall, 70 bottles of beer on the wall, 70 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 69 bottles of beer on the wall, 69 bottles of beer on the wall, 69 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 68 bottles of beer on the wall, 68 bottles of beer on the wall, 68 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 67 bottles of beer on the wall, 67 bottles of beer on the wall, 67 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 6 bottles of beer on the wall, 66 bottles of beer on the wall, 66 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 65 bottles of beer on the wall, 65 bottles of beer on the wall, 65 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 64 bottles of beer on the wall, 64 bottles of beer on the wall, 64 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 63 bottles of beer on the wall, 63 bottles of beer on the wall, 63 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 62 bottles of beer on the wall, 62 bottles of beer on the wall, 62 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 61 bottles of beer on the wall, 61 bottles of beer on the wall, 61 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 60 bottles of beer on the wall, 60 bottles of beer on the wall, 60 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 59 bottles of beer on the wall, 59 bottles of beer on the wall, 59 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 58 bottles of beer on the wall, 58 bottles of beer on the wall, 58 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now 57 bottles of beer on the wall, 57 bottles of beer on the wall, 57 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 56 bottles of beer on the wall, 56 bottles of beer on the wall, 56 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 55 bottles of beer on the wall, 55 bottles of beer on the wall, 55 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 54 bottles of beer on the wall, 54 bottles of beer on the wall, 54 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 53 bottles of beer on the wall, 53 bottles of beer on the wall, 53 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 52 bottles of beer on the wall, 52 bottles of beer on the wall, 52 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 51 bottles of beer on the wall, 51 bottles of beer on the wall, 51 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 50 bottles of beer on the wall. 50 bottles of beer on the wall, 50 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 49 bottles of beer on the wall, 49 bottles of beer on the wall, 49 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 48 bottles of beer on the wall, 48 bottles of beer on the wall, 48 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 47 bottles of beer on the wall, 47 bottles of beer on the wall, 47 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 46 bottles of beer on the wall, 46 bottles of beer on the wall, 46 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 45 bottles of beer on the wall, 45 bottles of beer on the wall, 45 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 44 bottles of beer on the wall, 44 bottles of beer on the wall, 44 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 42 bottles of beer on the wall, 43 bottles of beer on the wall, 43 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 42 bottles of beer on the wall, 42 bottles of beer on the wall, 42 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 41 bottles of beer on the wall, 41 bottles of beer on the wall, 41 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 40 bottles of beer on the wall, 40 bottles of beer on the wall, 40 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 39 bottles of beer on the wall, 39 bottles of beer on the wall, 39 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 38 bottles of beer on the wall, 38 bottles of beer on the wall, 38 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. There's 37 bottles of beer on the wall, 37 bottles of beer on the wall, 37 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 36 bottles of beer on the wall, 36 bottles of beer on the wall, 36 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 35 bottles of beer on the wall, 35 bottles of beer on the wall, 35 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 34 bottles of beer on the wall, 34 bottles of beer on the wall, 34 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass one on, pass it around. That's 33 bottles of beer on the wall, 33 bottles of beer on the wall, 33 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 32 bottles of beer on the wall, 32 bottles of beer on the wall, 32 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 31 bottles of beer on the wall, 31 bottles of beer on the wall, 31 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 30 bottles of beer on the wall, 30 bottles of beer on the wall, 30 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 29 bottles of beer on the wall, 29 bottles of beer on the wall, 29 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 28 bottles of beer on the wall, 28 bottles of beer on the wall, 28 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 27 bottles of beer on the wall, 27 bottles of beer on the wall, 27 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 26 bottles of beer on the wall, 26 bottles of beer on the wall, 26 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 25 bottles of beer on the wall, 25 bottles of beer on the wall, 25 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 24 bottles of beer on the wall, 24 bottles of beer on the wall, 24 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 23 bottles of beer on the wall, 23 bottles of beer on the wall, 20 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 22 bottles of beer on the wall, 22 bottles of beer on the wall, 22 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 21 bottles of beer on the wall, 21 bottles of beer on the wall, 21 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 20 bottles of beer on the wall, 20 bottles of beer on the wall, 20 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 19 bottles of beer on the wall, 19 bottles of beer on the wall, 19 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 18 bottles of beer on the wall. 18 bottles of beer on the wall. 18 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 17 bottles of beer on the wall. 17 bottles of beer on the wall. 17 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 16 bottles of beer on the wall. 16 bottles of beer on the wall. 16 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 15 bottles of beer on the wall. 15 bottles of beer on the wall. 15 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 14 bottles of beer on the wall. 14 bottles of beer on the wall. 14 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's 13 bottles of beer on the wall. 13 bottles of beer on the wall. 13 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 12 bottles of beer on the wall. 12 bottles of beer on the wall. 12 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 11 bottles of beer on the wall. 11 bottles of beer on the wall. 11 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it. Take one down. Take one down. Take one down, pass it around. That's 10 bottles of beer on the wall. 10 bottles of beer on the wall. 10 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 9 bottles of beer on the wall. 9 bottles of beer on the wall. 9 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 8 bottles of beer on the wall. 8 bottles of beer on the wall. 8 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 7 bottles of beer on the wall. 7 bottles of beer on the wall. 7 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 6 bottles of beer on the wall. 6 bottles of beer on the wall. 6 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 5 bottles of beer on the wall. 5 bottles of beer on the wall. 5 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 4 bottles of beer on the wall. 4 bottles of beer on the wall. 4 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 3 bottles of beer on the wall. 3 bottles of beer on the wall. 3 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. 2 bottles of beer on the wall. 2 bottles of beer on the wall. 2 bottles of beer. Take one down, pass it around. That's 1 bottle of beer on the wall. 1 bottle of beer on the wall. 1 bottle of beer. Take one down, pass it around. Now there's no bottles of fucking beers on the fucking wall. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. My throat. Lord have mercy on my gosh darn soul, bruh. That was world record pace. I did mess up, but I was at world record pace, bro. I'm not gonna lie. We did that whole, oh, I forgot to stop the timer. An hour and like 37 minutes. All right, y'all. Well, 1,000 bottles of beer on the wall. We did that. We killed that. We smashed that. I don't want to ever do something like this again, but there's probably going to be another YouTube video that is going to drop at some point in the future. But I appreciate y'all. You feel me? We did it. 1,000 bottles of beer on the wall. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe, do y'all thing. And I love y'all. Zim got out.